Alright guys, Papa Pepper here, talking to you guys about volunteer plants today. If you follow my Steemit account, you may have heard me mention volunteer plants quite a few times, and a lot of the plants we actually have growing down in our garden right now were volunteer plants that came in at our other garden, our old garden site. And one thing that I knew was going to happen for us is that we were going to be able to use our old garden site as kind of a nursery to bring up some seedlings that we could put down in our new garden site. So we had things like stinging nettle, hops, mint, tomatoes, tomatillos, dill, a variety of things that came in at the old garden site. That's not even all of it, it's just all I can remember at the top of our head. But then a lot of our new garden site has also grown up where it was raw earth like a year ago. But we ran some pigs and goats through here. And one thing that we did when we were running the pigs through is that we would feed them a lot of our scraps rather than composting them at the time. So we've gotten a number of volunteers that have come in. We actually had a whole field of tomato plants coming in. Eventually I just let them go because we had so much going in the garden, and I think the goats mowed them down to nothing eventually. But for instance, this ground cherry is from a nice volunteer plant. It's a pretty big plant we got growing here. There goes another ground cherry coming off. And I really wanted to plant some of these this year. I love growing them. I've got two, but I didn't plant any. These are just volunteer ones that came up on their own. So by kind of identifying seedlings when you get started, you can keep an eye on what you got going in your garden and know that it's going to be something that could be useful. Additionally, this one right here running up this fence, I got a big cucumber here growing along this fence. It's all over the ground here. Now when it first started, all I knew is that it could be a kiwano, which looks very similar. It could be some sort of squash or pumpkin. It could be a cucumber. I didn't know what it was going to be. But since it was in an area where there's a couple daikon radishes growing in here. But for the most part, I'm just growing my Korean goji berries, which is this little plant here. And the Korean goji berries aren't going to get that big this year, but they're going to be a perennial where they eventually fill in this thing. I'll use this to help support the plant because they're kind of stringy and wispy. And unlike the Chinese goji berry, the Korean ones actually do better in my growing zone, so I will probably try growing both. But I wanted to get these started right away because if they do better, why not have them growing? So when I saw this guy coming in, I wasn't sure what he was. But then eventually I found little tiny cucumbers, okay, like that. And then I've got one here, and you're going to notice it's bigger than it should be for eating. And the reason I did that is I'm like, you know what, if this is a type of cucumber that's going to replant itself anyway if it gets away from us, I'm going to grow a nice big one for seeds because it looks like it's going to turn out and mature at a real nice size for whole dill pickles. And I like that. There's a couple of different varieties we grow for a couple of different reasons. There's some that our neighbors are growing that I want to grow in the future. But I definitely want a nice hardy little cucumber to be growing for our pickles. And I'm like, this is it. So not only did it come up on its own this year, and it's sprawling everywhere. I got to train it up this thing some more. But it's going to have somewhere to grow where as an annual, it can grow here. It can fill in this thing this year. It's not really going to affect my Korean goji berries other than giving them a little bit of shade. But then it'll be gone this year as long as I collect the seeds myself and don't let that rot here and reseed itself. And then the Korean goji berries will be free to go through this whole area next year, and they'll provide me with a good seed off of this plant anyway because I let it grow. I noticed I'm like, you know what, that's not actually a weed, that's something, let's see what it turns into. Now if it would have been a kiwano or something, I've got so many of those growing anyway, I would have picked it, or if it would have been something less desirable. But this one was a good one. And even I know sometimes you can have an area where you have annual plants that reseed themselves and they get kind of treated like a perennial. So my neighbor has some dill it does that every year, where he never plants dill, but he has it every year. So I actually got a couple of seeds this year, so the seed heads, and tossed them in between some of my peppers. And we're going to see if we can't just get those to grow up since it's late in the season and his had already gone to seed. I'm going to use the peppers to kind of shade the seedlings. Hopefully, eventually they'll get up beyond the peppers and produce some dill for us this year, later in the season, and then potentially reseed themselves too, so we could have some next year. But it's already a variety that grows well here and reseeds itself from my neighbor, so I figured why not give it a try. So for those of you who haven't heard me talk about volunteer plants yet, I hadn't made a YouTube video about it, so I want just to put it out there, so kind of share that idea, and it's part of gardening that I love. So I'm going to get to eating these ground cherries. We're going to let that guy grow, and I'll see you guys later. Papa out. As always, I'm Papa Pepper, and I'd like to remind you, don't post for free. If you'd like to be part of a revolution in social media, an economic power to the people where users can actually blog for cryptocurrency, then I'd recommend that you check out steemit.com and join the revolution. Papa out.